Good morning and welcome to the latest Register webinar on data theft protection and data loss prevention. Protection, you decide, you can make it up because most people do with these acronyms. The way I like to understand the difference between them is that old adage which has been traced back to a restaurant somewhere in Chicago, which is never put down to malice. What can be ascribed to ignorance? So malice is the theft stuff, and ignorance is the lost stuff. But one way or another, it does result in companies losing their data. It's been a problem, I understand, ever since people first started rifling through bins for printouts, and it remains a problem today in this very, very different world. And here to help us understand the issues around it, the things people can do about it, and whether or not it's a solvable problem are some very good friends here from Raytheon WebSense. So I have Chris Jones, I have Neil Thacker, and good old Tony Locke, who I'm delighted to be sharing this experience with once again, because it's been a while, from Freeform Dynamics. So before we start, what I thought we could do really is just go around the table and ask Chris, Neil and Tony what's really important to get out of this webinar by way of introduction. So maybe if we start with you, Chris,
sure.
Remembering not to lead forward,
yes.
because that's always going to be a challenge on this one.
Camera.
So Chris Jones from Raytheon WebSense,
yes.
What's it about?
So I'm here really, I suppose, from the customer perspective. I work for the pre-sales engineering team within Raytheon WebSense. Mm-hmm. So my job is constantly speaking to customers and prospective customers about how they are doing this, what they want to do and what the challenge is. So I think that's the angle I'm going to bring to this. How can a DLP, DLT solution be implemented, and what should be the steps that people would go through to do that?
Mm-hmm. Over to you, Neil.
I've been working with DLP technologies for 10 years. They say an old hand utilising these technologies.
Let's see your hand, please.
It's steady. Happy with
DLP.
I'm the security officer for Raytheon WebSense for the EMEA region. So day in, day out, I deal with, dealing with security incidents, working with, our customers around protecting privacy, all of these kind of things. And this is something I'm seeing now as being a hot topic.
And you haven't always worked for a vendor of software,
No,
have you?
no. Before joining Raytheon WebSense, I worked for Camelot, the UK lottery operator. Mm-hmm. And again, collecting, processing, and obviously securing very important data, PII, PCI, compliant. So DLP was again a big factor in protecting data.
Mm-hmm. And Tony, what's the deal with DLP, DLT? Is the world? No, we can't go there, can we? Over to you.
The big issue is really that, as you said, this is a problem that's been around since day one of computing, but the attention on data has now become ever higher. There's much more scrutiny on what we do with data, how well we protect it, and that scrutiny is only going to increase. And so it's now time to actually make sure that you've got everything as good as you can.
Mm-hmm. I mean, on that note, then, we've got the danger with the security industry, as everyone knows, is people are always saying, the sky's going to fall in. It's an awful place. Things are going very wrong. So the risks around DLP and DLTs, what problem are we trying to solve here? Is it really increasing, or is it just changing? What's the deal, Tim?
Well, the deal is, and we get this information from the rate readers every time that we talk to them, that there's great diversity of access, both in terms of devices being used and the number of people accessing things. More importantly, we've also got threat attacks that are becoming ever more sophisticated, and a lot of social engineering wrapped around that, making it harder to protect against that accidental loss, the non-designed. Whether that's accidental or not, it's really not an issue now, because the data itself is so valuable that you can't do anything about it. Mm-hmm. And user ignorance is obviously part of that, both in terms of when they are being targeted, but also just being careless, because people are still careless with data, particularly when it's somebody else's data. We don't feel personal about information. We might feel personal about the company car, or sometimes even the device that we're using, but maybe not the information that's actually contained within it. Mm-hmm. The big issue that maybe is changing slightly is that the lack of air cover that there's traditionally been wrapped around data loss prevention or data theft prevention, because it's been hard often to make a business case, except in a very few specific scenarios where there's an absolute legal requirement to make sure that you've got things locked down. That's beginning to change though, because of this increased profile that data and its potential consequences for the business, both financial and otherwise, can have in terms of brand, etc.
But in your experience, Neil, are you pushing on an open door when you go to customers about this stuff?
Yeah, I mean, from a risk perspective, so when you start focusing on risk and primarily business risk, this seems to be what people want to be talking about. They want to talk about the data. They want to be analysing data. They want to be using that data for good measure. But at the same time, they need to be very wary of how they're collecting and processing that information. Tony mentioned there again, perhaps some laws, some legislation around this. We have a proposed new law that's due to come in next year that requires organisations to better protect data. And in some cases, again, notify the authorities. Is now going to be a mandatory requirement to notify authorities if you have a data breach. Currently that doesn't exist. So there are going to be changes, there's going to be a shake-up. I think some of it coming through legislation, some from the risk area where risk can no longer be accepted around data loss, data theft.
I mean, there's a question, I'll bring you in, Chris, on this one. Essentially what we're talking about here is a kind of scenario where someone's actually checking, or something's actually checking what it is that people do, so we don't do stupid or callous things, right? So the question in my head is, how stupid and callous are people, and how much protection do they need before it becomes actually a bit of an imposition?
Yeah, well, I suppose you're looking at almost the Big Brother effect on this.
I didn't want to say that. So,
it is tricky because you talk about
you set them up, I'll set them up, you knock them down. So.
The tricky thing is is it stupidity, is it malice? I think for the most part unfortunately it's the ignorance side of the coin that people are going to fall down on. So having some technology, having a barrier there that helps and that monitors that is a good way of doing those things. The fact that also benefits the malicious side of things is brilliant, because those are always going to increase. The fact of the matter is now everybody's got access to all of this data that 5-10 years ago people didn't, and then suddenly the whole concept of the computing world has broadened and opened up, so that data can now flow out. We've not got a history of needing to be this careful with this information, really, not in the way that we do now, at least. So until we're used to it, until this feels like commonplace and the way that we work mentally, having that barrier in place, having that monitoring.
I mean, having some controls in place. I mean, there are sort of stupid things that people do that aren't necessarily seen as malicious, but boy, can they result in... Yeah. I mean, it's the backside on the photocopier scenario, as far as I'm concerned. It's like, hey, that's a bit of fun. No, it isn't. You know, it's those moments, isn't it?
It's the lost USB stick still. It's the lost iPad. It's the lost phone. These things happen. The thing that we've got to do is put in security solutions that still let people work effectively, and that they themselves don't see as being too big an imposition. Because with any sort of thing that people consider to be a limit on their ability to work, they start looking for ways around it, which is why that education about why we do things is equally as important as actually what we do and what you shouldn't do.
So a point I want to jump on around the education piece is I'm seeing in organisations, again, there is negligent activity because people have been given some training, some data handling training, and that's perhaps something that they have to recertify every year. But still, I mean, people are going to forget that training if they're only educated once a year. So it needs to be continuous education. We need to issue people with notifications, again, best practice guides. But the most relevant education is when you make it personal to them and their business as well.
And even the people doing that sort of regular training year after year after year is still pretty much a rarity. Because training budgets are really under pressure.
So this is a necessary thing. And if we look at the statistics, we've got some data. You've got some data that says, there's a problem. It needs, you need a solution, not because people want a solution. You need a solution because we actually have breaches happening. Yeah. And so if that's what I can see on the chart, I'm sure you can tell people what's showing on the chart. But there's a big red line there. Yeah, I mean,
if you go to most security conferences today, they'll talk about again you're likely to be a victim of a breach. So we wanted to ask people again, what are you actually seeing? And the majority of respondees said that they have been a victim of a security incident and a data breach that's resulted in that. So it is something that we're seeing. This is what most organisations today have seen in the last year. A few, 13% said they're unaware, perhaps because they lack visibility, perhaps because they think, again, perhaps a very small organisation has the opportunity to close down networks and restrict access. But I think most organisations will tell you they have seen a security incident and the consequence has been a breach.
I might be wrong, but I think a lack of awareness is probably not a good thing when it comes to data security.
That doesn't imply they've not had any data breaches.
Yeah,
Well, exactly.
The other thing here is that this come from security aware people in the first place. So if you go to the broader community, particularly smaller companies where they don't have security specialists, the number that are actually unaware is almost certainly much, much higher than the 1 in 8 that it says here, the 13%.
Yeah.
Another big thing that I find when speaking to people is sometimes they're unaware because they don't want to be aware. Unfortunately, it's a case of if they know there's a problem, then there's suddenly a hell of a lot of work that they have to do to do it, and it opens up a big old can of worms. So I do find out a lot that some resistance around the data is because, well, we're unsure of what we're going to find. So when I see statistics like that, it's actually the first thing that comes to my mind.
We know we've all been a bit overdrawn, and we thought, I don't want to look at that bank statement. Yeah, it's
going to be
human trade.
It's going to be interesting though with the change in law coming in next year, where if you are aware of a breach, you have to notify about the breach. Can you claim that you were unaware under those circumstances? How's the law going to be written to stop people being deliberately unaware?
Plausible deniability.
Well, that's going to be the thing,
expression,
isn't
it? So in response to that, then, I mean, that's the problem defined, if you like. We've got a challenge here, and we need to address it. So, going to throw up a picture. It says, well, there's a squillion things you can do, and it's all very, very complicated. There's lots of things around your content. There's this analyticsy stuff, but I mean, how can we, if this is the solution, where can we look within this to actually understand where to start?
Yeah, I mean, the reason for using this slide is it doesn't just start with a solution. You have to look at it from the content perspective. So most organisations today will have that content layer. They will have, again, gateway products. They have these gateway products covering their egress points. So this covers from an external or an internal threat actor perspective. They're monitoring for data leakage, but they're using gateway type products to do that, which is, again, a good thing. The problem is because of the way we handle data today, it's different. We have cloud, mobile, SaaS, virtualization, you name it. It's not always easy to do just with that content layer. So because, again, looking at in some cases, the number of events that we're looking at today, we have to look at it we have to apply analytics. From those analytics, we can look for certain outliers, behavior changes. We can start linking, again, certain events to a data breach. Data breach is typically, there is not one event that says you have a data breach, you need to investigate. There could be 5, 6, 7 events that are generated, and the incident is that data breach. And then from that, you can also then apply the context. So, for instance, an example that I've seen in organisations today, they have a data breach. They need to know what data has been stolen as part of their response program. Most organisations that you see today that have been in the news this year have taken a number of weeks to explain, well, this is what has been stolen.
But we can't talk about those, can we?
We can't talk about those. But of course, we have to start focusing on, again, the impact of the business. Because, again, response comes into this. Again, if we're talking about consumer information, consumers are adjusting to this kind of world where there are organisations out there that collect and process their information with their consent. And at the same time, they also need to ensure that that information is protected. So when there is a breach, response is adequate, and consumers are informed.
I mean, thinking about the TalkTalk example, what amazed me there was that they said, actually, we don't know. We don't know if there's been a lot of data loss. We don't know if our data is encrypted. It was absolutely a fascinating example of what not to say to worried people as far as anything else.
Not knowing whether it's encrypted or not is bad, but actually not knowing what data has been exfiltrated is by no means unusual.
Yeah.
Because
it's very difficult. It's very difficult.
Depending on the nature of the breach in the first place, it can be really hard to track down and does take time, but you've got to have the processes to know what to do when, and certainly some PR training.
Yeah. I think if you've not built that classification around the information, as if you don't know what you're looking for, suddenly when it does go missing, of course you're not going to know what has been taken. You were talking about the context around it. It's all about having some form of actionable intelligence. It's all well and good to know that you've been breached, but if you don't know what was taken, how it was taken, anything else that might have opened up, suddenly you're in a situation where you've only got such a tiny amount of the information. So having that intelligence at the back end of this allows you to actually move on with it and hopefully kind of resolve those sorts of issues. Certainly that's what I find.
It's to assess impact. The context will give you the impact to the organisation potentially. Everything else, we said that again, breaches are going to likely to happen. So to measure likelihood is quite straightforward. You are likely to be compromised. To measure the impact, that's the really difficult bit, and that's where the context helps.
And the presentation bit, just presenting to who?
So this could be presented to the security operations team, the people that are looking for security incidents.
Mm-hmm.
This could also be back to the again the information asset owners, the people that typically are accountable for that data.
Mm-hmm.
Presenting it to them. We talk about in the security world we don't have enough practitioners. We have a big issue with skills shortages. So this is actually presenting it back to again perhaps the rest of the team outside of information security. We talk about this needs to be pervasive across the again organisations today. So you can actually present meaningful metrics to those individuals,
Mm-hmm.
and they can then make decisions, take action based on that.
It can also be useful to present it back to the person who's done the breach. If we're talking about an accidental leakage of information rather than some theft, presenting it to the person who's done it in the first place is a great part for education.
Kind of, you bloody idiot alert. It's
Possibly slightly more tactful than
Yeah,
that.
more political. Yeah.
But I mean, we talked a little about this earlier, and when I'm speaking with customers about how they lay out their plan, I will first say your first stage of a DLP project is to audit. Just see how big the problem is, so you know what the impact to you is going to be as a team's going to be. The second stage is always notifications. Don't go straight to blocking. I mean, whether you choose to notify a manager, the data owner, or the person that's doing that, what you're looking to do is actually bring down those accidental breaches so that people aren't doing it.
Are you sure that was such a good idea? Alert.
The other thing is just people aren't necessarily sure that they shouldn't be doing something like that. Oh, so I'm not allowed to send that out over Gmail. Really?
Mm-hmm.
I didn't know that. And when I've run these evaluations with customers, you might see 100 breaches in month one. By the end of month two, after a big period of notifications, we've dropped that down massively, which means when we do move into a blocking or whatever the next stage phase is, actually we're dealing with a much smaller problem. So the presentation layer is really key, because without that, suddenly what's the information even for?
Mm-hmm.
And it's really important to do it in a timely fashion as well, so that you can get people while they're still aware that they actually did this, rather than try and have to remember something from 2 months ago.
Yeah.
I mean, this awareness theme seems to be quite a big one.
Awareness
Not just in
education.
terms of making people aware of what they should do, but then whether or not they've not done it or whatever. So this solution almost becomes part of the awareness process.
It's part of the feedback cycle that actually helps people change what they do and why they do it, because they understand the impacts of it, as well as understanding that they will get noticed if it happens again, which might not be a good thing from a career point of view.
Speaking of feedback, if anyone does have any questions that's tuning into this webinar, please do feel free to flag them, and I'll ask our good panelists here any questions you might have about anything we talked about so far, or anything that springs to mind through the course of the webinar. So,
but again, the whole
do let me know.
disclosure thing is going to add to that presentation layer as well.
Yeah. This helps you with triage. So it helps you understand if you have a security incident or not, and the next step action. So if it is for instance, relating to elements of PII, personal identifiable information, and it relates to, again, consumer information, you have to notify the authorities. You have to make that quick judgment at that presentation.
Run me through PII just with more than just explaining the acronym.
Okay, so name,
I
name,
know
address.
what it means, but there may be people out there.
Anything that belongs to you. So your name, address, date of birth. It's even being debated now if your MAC address is.
I think the European Union's already decided that it is. IP addresses and MAC addresses are personally identifiable.
Yes,
It's the sort of information that we're all constantly uploading onto websites and forms and information. It's out there a lot. Everybody seems to have this, so I want to be sure that when I am giving that information to wherever it is I'm giving it, that it's secure. It's so easy to then do things with that.
And the value of that information is increasing. And this is why organisations will give you a free service if you supply that information to them.
I know, yes. It's actually not free. Yeah, that old one, yes. So a lot of things coming out about people and about the role of people in the solution. But Tony, you've got some data about the the impact of people on the problem
Well,
space, as it were.
Well, we do indeed. This is all about, concerns rather than, the reality of the breaches that we saw earlier, the numbers, etc. This is about where do the register audience actually have their major problems and their major challenges that they're looking about internally. And you can see that they're pretty evenly balanced between the employee-related internal side of things, lack of user knowledge and understanding, their inappropriate use of information, thoughtlessness, mishap, all the way down to somebody actually specifically trying to steal information internally or deliberately leak it, pass it on to someone. But that's much, much smaller than the accidental side. Mm-hmm. And then you've got the mechanisms whereby, the threats are actually coming into the organisation. So loss and theft is still, a big issue for everybody. People do lose smartphones, and smartphones now have got more and more and more company information on them, or access to company systems as well. Same with, the pad type devices, the touchpad screens, etc. All of that's an issue. It's been an issue since the day the first laptop came into the business, and arguably the day the first PC came into the business, because PCs were stolen from offices as well. It happens a lot. But then you got all the way through to deliberate external attacks coming in via phishing, which are getting more and more sophisticated, much more targeted to individuals, using a lot of that social media information that we've all pushed out there, all the way down to direct hacking, targeting us as an organisation specifically. And you no longer have to be one of the really big guys to be a target now, because the actual costs of doing attacks into companies are dropping all the time. And even if the return from an individual customer might not be so high, the cost of it being so low to attack you in the first place means that maybe the economic return for the attacker could be enough, or you could be part of somebody else's supply chain, so a route into a bigger fish. You could be the sprat that catches the mackerel. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. So it's all in there. User-related risk covers a multitude of different sins.
I'm just reminded of a story of very recently. I had a very targeted spam email, which looked like it came from a company called DocuSign. And it looked like it came from a startup. And I talk to startups and they get me to sign things on DocuSign. And I was actually really impressed with the fact that they'd got a specific thing that related to what I do in the way that I might do it in the modern world. It wasn't just from Halifax Bank, who I'm not with, or etc. So good on you, spammer. I was particularly impressed by that.
I mean, there's a point you made earlier about malicious users internally, and how people are kind of thinking, well, the information, if someone's dedicated to trying to get this, it will. And that's a point that I find really often when speaking with customers, especially if they're slightly resistant to the idea of DLP, is, well, there's always going to be a way of getting this out. If we put some controls in, they'll just find another way of doing this. And of course, the idea of a DLP or a DTP solution isn't to stop everything. It'd be nice if we could, but it's not, no guarantee. But it's to catch the vast majority. And what we do see is if somebody is maliciously trying to steal this information, they're very unlikely to start with the most complex, really sophisticated way of doing this. They'll probably start with something very, very simple without necessarily realising that they're being monitored. So we're looking at, there's almost like an analysis chain of, well, they started off just trying to email this, and then maybe they did a screen print of that information because they wouldn't have realised that there's optical character recognition going on. So that there's that nice path. So whilst you might not actually catch the people who are really, really dedicated, you'll probably have enough information of their path to getting to that point to have a decent business case there.
It's one of the great unspoken truths in business that organisations have really always been very aware of the potential for internal threats, but never wanted to speak publicly about it. And frankly, if you talk to a security guy or an IT pro, in the bar after work, then everybody knows that the biggest risks until recently have always been internal. Through both malicious attacks, which are fortunately very few, but can be quite difficult to track down, through to just the accidental side. But that internal stuff has always been a problem and always will be. But catching things early and getting that notification so that you've got some idea of what's going on is the really important part. So seeing a pattern and working on it, acting on it.
The pattern, looking at behavioural analytics, this is a big thing today. We talk about behavioural analytics to identify malicious insiders or negligent insiders. One of the kind of areas around behavioural analytics is, again, you are infringing on privacy. most employees today don't like to go into their organisation and be monitored from when they log on to when they log off. And then when they get home, they may have a laptop, they may be, again, a tablet device. They don't want to be monitored consistently.
Mm-hmm.
So the value from DLP is that's a valuable source of information that you can then look from a behavioural analytics perspective, because it's focused on the data of the organisation, not on the individual's, again, behaviour. It's focused on the data itself. So in most organisations across the EU that have issues with privacy and workers' councils, DLP is again the primary source of that information to allow them to run behavioural analytics.
Mm-hmm. Can I just say the irony of the fact that we are very keen on our privacy in the workplace, and then we go on to social media sites and are very happy with the fact that any third party can analyse what we do to death, which is kind of curious, which is a good segue as well into the modern world. So we've got some specifics that relate to what you might call digital, relate to what you might call all that cloudy stuff, that mobile, all these extra facets of technology that have really appeared over the past decade. And so Neil, can you bring DLP, DLT up to date, if you like, and say what are the specific areas that it needs to cover that, I'll use the term traditional solutions are still catching up with?
Yeah, so I mean, to start off with how businesses have changed. Businesses have changed, again, fundamentally over the last few years, and now most organisations are data-driven. They rely more on their supply chain. Actually, if you look at disruption to an organisation, if you break that supply chain, it's a huge issue to an organisation. So it's actually understanding also where data is moved. Again, data handling between that supply chain is really important, and also the integrity of that data. So for instance, you have a supplier, they're supplying you with, again, a certain type of service or goods. If somebody can meddle with that data,
mm-hmm.
It can cause a massive disruption. So again, that's where also DLP can help. It can look at, again, integrity of data in use, data in motion, and obviously ensure that the integrity is kept. So that's one kind of area that I can focus on just on business.
Mm-hmm.
Organisations today are more business risk focused than ever before. They're less so focused on business threat or compliance, or in some cases perimeter type security. Their primary goal now is a focus on business risk.
Mm-hmm.
Kind of secondly, when we talk about the threat landscape, again, insiders, most, again, polls we see today, response is the insider is probably the biggest threat to the organisation today. They already have access
mm-hmm.
to the organisation's data. So again, monitoring, making it relevant to a security incident from an insider's perspective is also important.
Mm-hmm.
Even from an external attacker's perspective, they will now chain events together. We've been talking about things like the kill chain for many, many years, and stage 7, which is that data exfiltration. You need to determine that as a security incident. You need to look at the events that build up to that and apply that context at that layer. So if you're looking at just malware primarily, and looking to block all malware.
7 thing.
It's a 7-stage kill model, 7-stage kill chain model.
We've been talking about it for many years.
We've been talking about it for many years. Yeah, I'm not going to go through it. I don't want to take up too much time talking about it.
Skip stages 1 to 6.
Yeah, stage 7 is about data exfiltration.
Right.
So
exfiltration.
Exfiltration. So again, a determined adversary, a targeted attack, they get into your organisation. Most remote access Trojans today,
mm-hmm.
again, are designed to compromise networks, compromise endpoints, and then lay in wait and exfiltrate data. That's their purpose. That's what they've been designed to do.
Get data out.
Out, yeah. Not so much disrupt. Again, bring up pop-ups and again ask people to click on things. They're very covert when it's an organisation that's been targeted. So again, you have to be aware of that threat landscape and how that's changed as
mm-hmm.
well. There's a whole threat landscape that ties nicely with a loss landscape, a controls landscape, and again, overall risk landscape. But when you start measuring all of those things, data breaches sits highly almost in the top 3
mm-hmm.
Regarding those things. So if you're just focusing on business threat, you have to look at it from that perspective, or a data breach itself. And then you kind of the other issue that pretty much hits most security teams today is there's complexity everywhere. You're told you need 50 or 60 or 70 technologies in order to counter that threat.
Mm-hmm.
And most organisations do. They have that many technologies, and they have 2 people trying to manage those. All of those technologies need to be updated, they need to be patched, like any operating system out there. And again, they need to be managed. And then you need to look at all the event information that comes from those sources and being able to analyse and look for that security incident. And I can tell you, it's very difficult to do.
Mm-hmm.
And what's been happening over the last few years is correlation, consolidation of those security technologies has been a focus. Yet we still see things like SIEM technologies. I think there's a recent poll from again a very big technology vendor that offers SIEM technologies, and they say 1% of security incidents are detected by an SIEM solution.
Mm-hmm.
So we know that's not working.
That's security incident and event management.
Correct. Information event management. Yes,
Oh, yeah.
pretty good.
You heard it here.
So yeah, that's the other issue. So how do we deal with the complexity? How do we deal with the threats increasing? And then how do we deal with the change to business? There's no easy answer, unfortunately. You have to work at it.
I'm going to hand over to Tony. Thank you for that expose of the challenges. And Tony, in response,
One thing that Neil said there that's really important is this idea that you've got to protect the data. And we asked the register audience about a year ago, maybe 18 months ago, did they see things changing around how they protect, the organisation and the organisation's risk? And there was a huge response that said, yes, we realised that the days of putting up, lots of firewalls and big barricades to keep people out, it doesn't work anymore. It's not effective. We know that we've got to change to something that's much more data-centric, data-focused. But they also said, we just don't know how to make that change. Mm-hmm. So getting people how to begin to move closer to looking at the data and what the data is doing and how important is the data, because not all data is equally important. Some you don't care if someone nicks it. You might be very happy if they did. Other stuff is really critical that it doesn't go anywhere that you don't want it to. And you need to narrow that down and make sure you've got a visibility on it. Mm-hmm. But we asked again about 18 months ago in a different survey the audience about DLP generally. And as you can see, despite bigger companies, more sophisticated companies having DLP solutions in place, you can see from the chart on the left that lots of people still do not have DLP solutions in their environments. A lot of them will be smaller and mid-sized businesses, but they're really challenged with actually getting it working. And when we looked across to the other side, and saying, if you have used DLP, what's been your experience of it? You can see there's quite a lot of difference in the opinions there. There's a small number that say, yep, it's really effective, really easy to do. Some almost equal numbers saying it's really effective but difficult to do, and lots of people saying it's not effective at all and easy to do, or it's not effective and really difficult to do. So our previous experience over the last 10 years of DLP is part of the challenge that we're now faced with. It's not something new. We've been trying to do it for a long time. Can we actually learn from the experiences of the past decade to improve what we have now with this increased focus on data? That's the really key thing here.
I've got a question here. It's relevant to this, so I'll bring it up now. And I'll put it to you, Chris. It's around the different kinds of companies. So essentially the question is: a smaller company, should I still be thinking about this in the same way as bigger companies? But I'm going to broaden the question. So, are there certain structures? Is it more about compliance-oriented stuff, etc., that have different criteria? But go for the big and small first.
Yeah, it's a tricky question because obviously there's lots of different types of organisation, and it's very difficult to generalise. But
in your experience,
in my experience, no, I found that the smaller side of the customers have got just as important data. If you're a startup, then actually your data is really critical to what you're doing. You don't have as much. But the advantage for the small organisations is they will realistically know who owns that data. It will be a lot more focused and more targeted, whereas you go into the larger organisations and they've got lots of information, but they don't know who owns it, and actually the person you're speaking to doesn't even know what half of that data is. So the risk, I think, is equal for both. A larger company is probably slightly in a better position to weather the storm if they are to have a data breach. I think with a smaller company, if their data is critical enough, it could be enough to take them out of the equation.
But the larger company is going to be more complex, isn't it? So
absolutely, and therefore it's a different challenge to bring that DLP project to somebody's attention and to actually do it correctly. And going back to some of the kind of the figures you were seeing before, I think that's what puts a lot of people off. They've seen it done or they've heard about it being done badly.
Yeah.
So whether you're a small company or whether you're a big company or whether you're an organisation that is heavily regulated or whether you're a company that's just got your own unique intellectual property, you still need to overcome that burden and to work out how is the best way of doing it and to do it. Now, of course, there's going to be some companies whose data just isn't as important or they've got higher preferences of things to be done.
I'm going to ask as well on the small large company. I'm just thinking about costs because there is an overhead for implementing some of this stuff.
This is the big thing, not just costs, but also IT resources. You know, small companies run with very small IT teams that are IT generalists, and so there's again this impression, as you said, that DLP is complicated and expensive, and so that's something that we need to educate people about. Well, are they still true? Is it too expensive for very small companies to do? Probably not. But just back on the data thing, is there really any data that's not valuable or certainly not protected by law? These days in the UK and the EU as a whole, there's very little data really that isn't protected in some fashion. Just with general data protection principles in mind. There's certainly specific examples around the personally identifiable and the financial information, etc., that has additional levies put upon them. But data, it's really difficult to say that this data we really don't care about unless it's something that you've published on your web.
The thing is, I think one of the issues is we can't put a price on data, or lots of organisations can't do that. So startup example is, again, they have some very valuable intellectual property. As Chris mentioned, if they lose that, that's the end of their business. What's the value of their business? DLP, again, if you're talking about it from a percentage perspective, could be not even, again, it could be 0.5% of the value of that data to implement that technology. But that is that's how you approach it from a risk perspective. You look at potential impact of a data breach, losing that intellectual property, therefore you have to justify that as a countermeasure. It's basic risk management principles, and that's something that, again, organisations, and I'm not targeting IT or InfoSec professionals, just generally organisations really struggle to put that value on that item.
I couldn't agree more. It's getting people to understand the business case of why security is important instead of just treating it as some form of insurance that we have to do. Compulsory insurance we do. Everything else, in fact, that it helps the business be stable, grow, prosper, and not be at risk is something that people struggle with, and making a business case on those grounds is more challenging than a straightforward, here's what we cost, here's the positives that come back from it.
Yeah. And I think most organisations realise the value of the data post-breach. They're very good at understanding that.
Hindsight's a lovely thing for these sorts of things.
I've got a funny feeling that understanding the value of the data is it's not a bullet that comes up later, but it's certainly something that will be discussed as we look at how to solve this problem. But before we do, I know what we wanted to do was just present what exactly are we talking about here when it comes to data breach, etc. So if I flick onto the next chart, and maybe Chris, if you could just give us, here's a very specific example of what the problem we're actually trying to solve here.
Yeah, and this is the sort of thing I actually go through with customers when I'm speaking to them. You mentioned earlier about how people think this might be complex, and obviously if you look at it from a very, very high level, maybe it appears to be, but you have to start simple. And if you do that, then actually the process almost writes itself and you can just take it step by step. So I always follow this order. So what we call, PII records cannot be sent by HR to, and each of those is a step of where we can look at a policy. Yeah. And that's what we're doing. We're writing data policies here, and you start with the what are we looking at. So you decide what data we need to be focusing on. Now it's great if you're regulated because those things are predictable. PII is the same for you as the same for any company, essentially. But frankly, that could be absolutely anything. And then we're looking at the action. So maybe the action here is auditing. Maybe it's sending out notifications. Maybe it's running some other scripts. But it's what do we do next? Then we're looking at the channel. Interestingly enough, speaking to customers, the channel seems to be one they think of first. The amount of meetings that I've gone into where they say, we want to secure Dropbox. Now, Dropbox really, for me, when I hear Dropbox, I tune that out and I just hear the internet. Because that's what we're talking about. Dropbox is, of course, a stand-in for any of those sorts of tools. But okay, so we could secure Dropbox, but would you mind if someone uploaded that to Facebook? That's okay, is it? No, of course not. So the channel is important, but I would say come back to that later, and certainly don't think of it in such black and white terms. The next part, the who side, most of the time this is absolutely everybody. It's not a case of,
It's nice and straightforward.
Yeah, but sometimes you have different rules. So maybe with PII records cannot be sent by anyone, but we're going to allow the HR team to do it, but we're going to monitor them from doing it. So we've got two versions of the same sort of policy. So you don't sit there and think, well, because these people need to do it, then they're exempt and they could be breaching our data solution, in which case, what's the point?
What I'm getting from this, and this is going to sound like we staged it, which we absolutely didn't, is if you put the policy in place, if you put that set of rules in place, then you have your starting point for DLP, DLT.
Exactly.
And but there's a corollary to that, which is if you don't write down the rules, it's going to be quite hard to know what to put into place.
As a primary quick win, this is what I recommend. This is what I've seen work in organisations. Very, very quick win, focus on a department, focus on a data type, and just look at, again, general business processing. And if there's any exceptions to that, then you identify as an issue. And then you start building into the more complex deployment, data discovery, all those kind of things. But this is a great starting point. Again, this will demonstrate quick wins, and it should, if you go back to the information owner and asset owner, they should demonstrate why you've put in this technology, and they should then look at it as a good thing and feel slightly more empowered than they do currently.
I'm going to hand over to Tony, because I think if we take that up to the next level, if you like, we do end up, and as I say, none of this is staged, but it's all falling very nicely into place. So, Tony, before this, I just asked you to say, what are the things you'd recommend coming from the research that are the starting point for just how to think about these things?
It very much falls into line with what Neil just said. Don't try and do everything at once. It's the archetypal IT answer. Don't try and boil the ocean, because if you do, you're just going to generate rain clouds and get wet. Work on the data ownership and classification. Data ownership is well defined in some companies. In most of them, probably not, because it means lots of different things, like who decides how this data can be used. But also, some people in the business tend to think that means, well, do I actually have to look after this and make sure the backups are working and all that sort of stuff? So it can be a bit political. But understand what data you've got in the first bit, and in particular, focus on the stuff that you know is really important now. Then, as was said by Neil, you can look at doing the discovery to say, well, okay, we know that this lump of data here is really important. Is it actually being stored anywhere else as well, because someone's copied it off for either testing, or it's been moved to the cloud for DR purposes, whatever. But start simple, then get the buy-in, not just from the people signing for the budget, but also the actual end users, because if they get in the way, then it can be really hard to make it work. You've got to make it simple enough for them to use, and so that they understand why they're being asked to use it.
There's a fundamental question in the heart of that, isn't it? It's working out what matters. And then essentially saying to someone, does that matter? And if they say yes, then you say, well, we better do something about it. If they say no, then there's a debate, isn't there, essentially?
But that communication needs to happen. I think that's one of the issues we see today, is that it's either one way, you don't get response back. So you say, does it matter? I'm not sure. And that's it. And that kind of end of conversation. It needs to be a dialogue, and that's how, again, successful DLP programs work. They have this dialogue, they have constant meetings. Most organisations that are ISO compliant, they focus on 27001, they have their information owners defined, they have regular meetings, committee meetings, and they will discuss these types of items. And that's how the technology can also be almost process driven, or in some cases, again, driven by people. That's what needs to happen. If you just focus it from a technology, I think you're gonna lose out. It needs to be embedded within the culture.
And if you're a smaller company, you start off by asking, well, okay, what's the really important data that if something happened to it or was lost, we could go out of business, or it could cause us huge public embarrassment, or it could just cost us money, trust of our customers, etc. So identify that first, work out whose data is it, and then work collaboratively with them to work out, well, okay, what is the policy around this? What can and we can't do about it? And if you do need to get someone in to check the legal side of it, fine, you can do that. But start. Just don't say, okay, we put that off for another rainy day.
And I think a successful DLP project and policy will quickly prove how important and how relevant that data is. If you put in a rule and classify something and monitor it, and at the end people say, okay, well, so what? Then you know that isn't the important data and you can move on. But you will find the right things, and that isn't what people do. People don't put in information that they don't care about. They put in policies that monitor important things. When people see the results of that, suddenly it's actually that makes a lot of sense. Just having something that audits the information that is going out, that you're targeting on that, suddenly makes a data project relevant.
Is it worth turning it around rather than saying, I believe this data matters? Do you care? Rather say, what data matters to you, and would you like us to protect it? Can you switch roles here?
You can switch that, but you really need to start with the information that you're looking for in some way, because otherwise it's such a broad topic of information. Again, the Dropbox thing. What are people uploading to Dropbox? Are you actually going to have the time to look through the tens of thousands of examples of information that has been done there? So it does need to be pared back a little bit. Perhaps there are parts where that can be relevant.
And that's it, focus first, put in a solution that you can expand on, and hopefully don't end up with 25,000 separate policies, but that you can keep, the core set of rules very simple, very easy to understand, and very easy to implement. And more importantly, easy to monitor so that you can see what's going on and act when things change.
Yeah, and don't forget that the policies aren't permanent. The amount of times I've seen people who put in a policy on day one and it's still there 3 years later and they don't know what that's doing there, it's just generating incidents. Yeah. But that's just noise. If the policy is not good,
no uploading to MySpace. Just don't do it.
Yeah.
So, I mean, the way we're talking, that kind of makes me think that we should be starting simple and building maturity, maybe along the lines of a triangular graph that has several colours demonstrating what it is that we're talking about here.
Yeah.
Neil,
I don't know if everybody's counted how many times I've said business risk in this discussion. Quite a few times, but it's the hot thing right now. It's how we communicate to the boardroom. It's how we communicate to execs the value of the security program. And what I'm seeing is that organisations want to move and want to mature their security program to be more focused on business risk. To do that, you have to have an area of kind of technology to give you those metrics, to give you those measurements, and how you're demonstrating that. Most organisations today are kind of, I think, between 2 and 3. I think even we have a slightly confused slide there, 2 and 3 in the wrong order. But that's where they kind of currently are, between compliance. So it could be because of legislation. They're putting in DLP rules just to protect PII. It could be that they need to be PCI compliant and they're using Appendix B, compensating controls. They're using DLP to drive that purpose, which is great. But once putting in DLP, the idea really is you can mature that across the organisation. Don't just focus on one set of data or one data type or one defined purpose. Use it for security and risk purposes. So the idea really is you could put it in as a compliance. And number 2, you could drive and actually look at, again, understanding business threat. Again, understanding the action taken by the adversary. And again, this could be like a state-sponsored, nation-state-sponsored espionage actor trying to steal intellectual property from your organisation. They're going to use different types of malware.
What are the chances of that?
Yeah, I know it's pretty likely today. Even with contractors out there, we see contractors, crime as a service. This is kind of a big issue. But again, we can analyse the malware. We can look at them from how they're getting into the organisation. But in most organisations, they're able to get through, or they're able to target an individual and be very successful. So again, what's their action? Their action is to primarily steal data. Very few circumstances are they looking to disrupt, damage the organisation. If they can steal data, they can still damage, disrupt. We're seeing online activists stealing data, publishing this publicly to everybody that has access to the internet. That's pretty damaging to an organisation. You target a CEO, you steal their inbox, you paste it somewhere, paste bin. Everyone has access. That's hugely embarrassing to the organisation. More embarrassing than a defaced website, perhaps a small-scale DDoS attack. So again, understanding this, so building this up, looking at it from a business risk, data-centric perspective, that kind of stage 4, looking at DLP at that stage is important. So it's to ensure you're also looking at it from a pervasive view. Again, you've got the buy-in, you're doing data discovery, and just past compliance. You're also looking at it from behaviour analytics. You're looking to predict events before they occur. That's what everybody wants to do today. Predictive analytics is the hot thing again. And then again, tie this back into that business risk, demonstrate that on a regular basis.
Mm-hmm. And we haven't really talked, this being the register, this has not been a product pitch at all throughout the whole thing.
No.
But
if it is, then we've done something wrong.
If it is, then we've done something wrong, yeah. So that's all very good. But what we did want to say is, funnily enough, there is a need for tools in the whole of this, because it is about actually identifying data as it egresses from the organisation. So taking that right back to modern challenges, modern situations, changing world, maturity, etc., etc. We just wanted to put this slide out there, and I'll hand over to you to just run through these top 4 points, Chris, maybe, and get Tony's feedback on it in terms of why these 4 things really sprang to mind.
Yeah, so this is a very interesting concept, because I've been involved in DLP for quite a number of years now, and we talked to customers initially when interest was going with this about kind of dipping a toe into the water. And I think unfortunately a lot of people are still in that frame of mind, and unfortunately even worse, a lot of technologies are in that frame of mind where they'll just do a little bit of DLP, what I would classify as DLP light.
Mm-hmm.
So from a tick box perspective, they do it.
Have you got DLP? Yes, we have.
Yeah, but when I compare it against an actual DLP solution, it doesn't have any of the criteria that I would do. So this was a list of the things that I think are important. So looking at the breadth of coverage, a DLP light solution, maybe we'll just look at the email channel, or just at the web. Big problem you've got there though, you build a great policy detecting something, then you suddenly need to cover your other channel. You've got to start again. Looking for the out-of-the-box experience, it's got to work, it's got to be easy to use. So having things like the built-in regulatory compliance, and actually some of the advanced stuff I talked about earlier about how customers will very often think, well, this information is going to get out one way or another.
You just send a screenshot.
Yeah,
basically.
And again, using the DLP light phrase, those solutions aren't capable of doing that. So having really advanced features that you don't need to think about having in there is really, really handy. The next part is probably the most important one, and this is where everything boils down to the data itself. There's no accident that the D at the start is for data. You need to be able to classify all of those really important bits of information. Regulatory compliance, probably everyone can say they can do it, because as I said earlier, PII is the same for you as the same for everybody. But your immediate intellectual property, that is unique to you. Your customer list, your employee lists, your manufacturing codes, the code that you're developing on the software that you manufacture, all of those things are going to be unique to you. So you need the ability to, the term we use is fingerprint that data, so you know exactly what you're looking for, because those things are unique. And the final thing is the flexibility of the policies. Just the ability to find something and audit it, or maybe block it is great. But what about things like drip DLP? You want to stop people sending out large amounts of customer records. Brilliant, that's fine. It can monitor for a breach of, say, 50. But what happens if they send out one, and then another, and then another, and then another? To be able to monitor over longer periods of time and to build more context into this. Those are the facets of a proper modern DLP solution. I've obviously not covered everything that's there, but
I mean, those 2 latter points to me play right back onto the doing the things that matter. So if it's about data classification, it matters to classify data because you need to understand which data matters, and then as you said earlier, Neil, things change. So you can't put in place, and you mentioned it as well, Chris, you can't put in place something that is going to be a one shot, and then people may think they're done, but actually there's a kind of decay curve.
A life cycle.
It's over time, 2 years later, it's really not going to be as good as it was.
But it's also data retention. Something we haven't really covered at all is that how long are you allowed to keep that data? You may have been given consent to keep that data for a short period of time, and then you still have it 7 years later. Do you still need to protect it? Actually, you need to delete it. So discovery is important too.
It's a really interesting area, because we talk to many people, including the Register's audience, who tell us that on this age of data and how long we have to keep it for? Well, we decided a long time ago that this was much too difficult a thing for us to challenge, so we keep everything forever. And I was literally speaking to someone a couple of days ago who made that very statement to me. We keep everything forever. And okay, they might have good reasons for doing that, but it
We've
means...
all got that box of
Yeah.
screws in the garage because you never know.
Yeah, but that's the point. There's some data that literally you cannot keep forever, and keeping it forever is a crime.
Yeah.
End of story. But again, the awareness of that, even amongst very senior business people, just isn't there. Lots of business people, to get back to this data ownership thing, tend to look on data and IT in general, and data being just part of IT. It means it's somebody else's problem. It's the IT guy's problem. It's the reg reader's problem. And trying to get the ways that we can explain that back to the business managers so they understand the business risk, so they understand the consequences, so the end users understand what's going on, and get them, everybody together, prepared to do something about it. That's the big issue with DLP, and getting a modern solution that you can actually use out of the box, with templates and policies pre-written that you can actually pull in and work out for yourselves. Well, okay, that one looks sensible. We can apply it to HR. We can apply it to the finance guys, rather than having to stop and think about it from scratch. Help smaller and mid-sized companies actually begin. And once you begin, if it is easy enough to use and it works, then you can grow from it.
Yeah, one policy will lead to the next. It's that whole concept of keeping it simple. If you get it right the first time, actually, you've almost got a template to build that out and to broaden it. You've built a fingerprint to stop a certain amount of information leaving your organisation. Well, why don't we also discover if copies of that exist elsewhere, so we can remove them or remediate against them.
But
But it is going to be a continuous process, because information changes. Fingerprints in this context will change. It's not like our fingerprints that don't change. These ones will change. You need to keep on top of it and regularly revisiting
and again, that's
expanding.
part of a modern solution. Some of the more basic ones don't have that capability. They won't have something like machine learning, which is more context based. Really important stuff to actually do this right, and to have a solution that fits you. It's a really common complaint is, well, our data's different to everyone else's. This wouldn't work for us. Well, absolutely it would. You just need to understand how.
Sure. And speaking of that how, I mean, this is like putting the crystal in the solute, isn't it? It's like, as you say, putting something in the middle of the organisation that says, let's manage that. But how do we put that thing in the middle? And I think everything has been around getting that awareness up, focusing on the things that matter, but ultimately keep it simple. And I wanted you to just, Neil, to just pick up on that final point, and if we can close off on this.
Yeah. So, I mean, to put everything into context, to get people interested in DLP, you have to set urgency. And I think we have enough urgency today with the scale of data breaches we read about, with changes to regulation, with, again, organisations today highlighting that as one of their top risk items, again, protecting data. So we already have the urgency set. The next step is, again, looking at how what we have to protect and how we protect it, and then building that out. So again, is it driven by compliance? Is it driven by regulation? If that's the case, then again we start building policies based on that. Is it because we have a piece of intellectual property, we've valued that item, we've had that discussion with the asset owner, and they've said this is our number one priority, we must protect this information. Perhaps they're a software company in the security field, have a valuable source code that they need to protect. That's one of our critical assets, therefore we put in a protection in place. And again, we could look at how data transforms, we can look at big data, we can look at fast data, we can look at structured, unstructured data, all these data types. From a security perspective and from an IT perspective, we need to understand different data types, and also how they move around, how they can change, and also how the value can change. That's our responsibility, I feel. The responsibility then is across the business to put that value, as I said, on that item, and to close that off.
And to close off this very webinar, I'm going to ask if we have any final thoughts on the last thing we should leave anyone. Chris, is there anything that you would say? Don't forget.
The first thing is, as I said, think of the data first. Don't think of the channel that you're leaking this information from. Start with the data, everything flows from that.
Start with the data. And Tony?
Are you happy that what you're doing at the moment works? If you're not, it's time to do something about it.
Fantastic. So thank you very much for tuning into this webinar with my good colleagues here at Raytheon WebSense and Freeform Dynamics. If you have any feedback or questions, queries, etc., do fire them over. Use the feedback form, use the questions form, and we will be very happy to get back to you. This will also be put up as a recording, so if you want to share with your colleagues, then please do. Hope you got something out of this. One last thing, on the last slide, here's a reading list, so make the most of it, and do share, and see you next time. Thank you very much.